on mine.
No, it is.
Okay. All right, cool. All right, so let me see. I don't know if she's muted or not. Kelsey, can you hear? Or talk? All right, well, I was just going to see, since basically the question was hers about how do we tell if our horses are complying or cooperating. I thought I might see if she had any more specifics behind that question. Okay. So for a lot of us that were educated in a more traditional housing of horsemanship, we weren't usually taught to pay attention to how our horses were perceiving our invitation. And I don't even think we were taught to invite the horses. We were taught more that we just tell them what to do. We are the leader, which in essence really meant we are the boss and they should do what we say. So it can be kind of an unwinding and unwrapping when we look at giving our horse the time and space to accept an invitation that we offer. And when we partner with our horses to do healing work, when they're co-facilitators, it's pretty amazing what they offer when we actually extend them invitations and then give them the option to accept or not. And I'm going to be really fancy here because I have a little video that was shot yesterday when I was letting Petey get used to a brand new teeter-totter. And it will look like I'm doing a lot of nothing, possibly. So let me see if I can get that. Okay. Okay, so Kelsey's going to join us there. I think this is, hey, can you see a video now or a picture?
Yeah.
Ha-ha.
Yes.
Okay, so this is basically just letting Petey check out this brand new contraption that we've got. And I am making sure that I am not pulling on him, and I'm actually not giving him much direction except maybe an invitation to come closer to me and check this thing out. And so, like right there, he paused a little bit, and I think had I pushed, let me pause this for a minute. In that moment, when he was standing still, that could have led to him, a while ago when we first started, I think it would have led to him shutting down a little bit. I think if I had pushed him now, since we've been working together at learning each other's invitations and requests and ways of communicating, I think rather than shutting down, he would have just walked away. But I think all of those little things, whenever they pause, how we let them enter into that space determines if they comply or if they cooperate. So let's see if I can start this again. All right. So even though I'm not doing anything, I'm not urging him, I'm not pulling him, I'm still extending the invitation for him to step on the board. And a lot of times it seems that just when I'm about, well, before, when I first started, when I was about to give up or think, okay, this isn't going to get anywhere, and just hang on a little longer, is like that when something will happen. And so this, I feel, is a lot more cooperation on his part, because I am not demanding that he do anything. So I let him step off the board. And again, I just inviting him to come closer, but not putting any pressure on. Oops, I think my screen just froze. Okay, so let me get back here. Okay, now I'm trying to get out of this. But anyway, any thoughts or questions so far on what extending the invitation so they can cooperate looks like?
Ooh. I lost it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So often, I think we can feel, because it probably has come down from how we were taught, that if we just stand there and let our horse take the time to process through something or figure something out, that we're either letting them ignore us, we're letting them call the shots, which again, that's been frowned upon a lot in most of the education that I had in the horse world. The idea was to get your point across and have them do what you wanted, when you wanted, how you wanted it, and why you wanted it. So this is a lot of times changing our mindset and letting it be okay that that horse makes a choice is where we have to start this whole process. And I know it's still been quite a journey for me, because sometimes I can still feel those pressures. Or like last year when we started doing Jewel's journey, documenting her progress towards participating in the cowboy dressage clinics, one of the reasons that I did it was to really prove that hanging out, letting them release tension, proceed to agree with us at their own pace, that would work. And I think one of the best validations ever was last week when we had Tim was out, our farrier, and when he got done with Sunshine, he was like, "Is this Little Horse?" Because that's what I called him all the time. But he had some interesting interactions with him, trying to trim his feet at times. And one of them, or a big reason, wasn't even really the fault of my red horse. He was in the barn getting his feet trimmed, and it was one of those, like, I don't remember, October or November, but it was windy day, cold, wet, and something scared him, and he fell on the cement. His hind legs went almost like he was doing the splits, and that marked a big change of how he was when he had his feet done, understandably, but he still had to have his feet trimmed. And so interestingly enough, taking my expectations that we should do a certain amount of stuff or accomplish a certain amount of things in a certain amount of time allowed him to be able to be more balanced mentally and physically, and stand like a good boy. So it was very fun that he got the A+ for the day. So I'm trying to think of any other specific instances that you ladies might have about how specifically we can tell if our horses are complying or cooperating?
Well, I think in the video that we just saw of Petey, you were supporting him, from the other end of the lead rope, but he on his own put one, hoof on it, then back down. Then he chose to put two on. To me, that seemed like that was very much a choice on his part.
Mm-hmm.
And watching him, that it was, kind of a free will, and it happened on his own time. And, you were there maybe kind of modeling for him, but yeah, I saw that as much more of a choice type of thing.
Okay. Yeah, good. And that's, the biggest, I really think the more that we let the horses have a choice, most definitely in the healing work, but for me that spilled over into more and more of the interactions that I have with them. Because if they don't choose to honor the invitation or to cooperate in some way, then it really doesn't feel like we're doing it together. That that connection through the bond just isn't the same, and that's pretty addicting. I think once you start to feel it, you don't want to do things without it anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm still trying to play around with it. My screen doesn't look how it should.
Do you think then it's like a spectrum or of compliance, or from choice to compliance? Because they can still choose even like under pressure, or you can, different ways that you invite them to do things, they can still choose until cooperation kicks in, and then or until compliance kicks in, and then they've given up to you.
Yeah, so, yeah, I mean, yes, I think you're right. You're saying that it's a continuum that
Mm-hmm.
they can either cooperate or comply.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yes.
Because I think when I introduced the board to Charlie today, there was a little more encouragement, because she'll check out and just ignore that there's something in front of her,
Mm-hmm.
and not explore it. But I still think she was cooperating and making choices. I just had to have more encouragement for her.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I think even just how you use the word encouragement,
Yeah.
Because depending on what the pressure of what we're inviting them to do is, will affect encouragement or support. And there's I think when we hold a horse, for example, we could be holding it, supporting it, or we could be holding it, restraining it. Like thinking about that time when we had the I forgot the name of it, the Livingston special something, where
Yeah.
Annie was at the wagon, the platform that we use to have people get on the horses, and there was someone interested in trying to ride her that was deaf and not very balanced physically, if I'm remembering correctly. And Liz was there to help. Annie agreed to let this person try to get on her back. And so we were standing there, and I had a hand on her, and I was supporting her. I wasn't, trying to hold her in place and make this happen. And, that because this wonderfully brave person was deaf or mostly deaf. She was very loud. She was not balanced. It was not a very graceful attempt to get on. And then I think she got a little overwhelmed and decided to get back off. And I had just been thinking a lot of facilities where I had seen that horses had, that they have to be led into a mounting area that's kind of like a chute almost. And, some of the apparatus and, chains on the nose and some other things to get the horse to stand still. And not saying that that is necessarily wrong, but the amount of choice that those horses have differs from, when a horse is standing there on their own and you're just kind of supporting them with a hand on her shoulder. So I think, that shows a lot in that continuum also, because, Annie still had some asking, will you come up here? Will you do this? And she said yes. It wasn't like we just had her at Liberty in the arena and she chose to come and stand at that platform. And I think sometimes when we encourage a horse, there's nothing wrong maybe with, or nothing that takes away from the relationship, to plant ideas or offer them. Here's a tarp. Can you investigate that? Some of the horses will be much more curious than others, so they will come up. But when they start, their eye gets, it's harder to describe. Maybe I'll have to get more proficient at showing things on this, but there's, it looks like nobody's home in their eye sometimes. And so I think that's their default mechanism to go into when they just have to comply. I'll get through this, it'll be done, and then we'll be on the other side. And so there's a big difference when you're standing with a horse that is kind of got that nobody's home look. And oftentimes we stand and stare at our horses at the farm as, their blinking pattern is changing, or their eyes might be blinking unsymmetrically. One eye is doing something different than the other. Those little ripples in the muscles on their muzzle start to go, and sometimes their lips will, like Annie's bunny lips, they'll just kind of move and twitch. And a lot of these things, if I hadn't learned to look for those, I would think the horse was just standing there too, or tuning you out. I think we end up hearing that a lot. Well, that horse is just tuning you out. Well, physiologically, they cannot tune us out because we're a predator in their space. It's not really possible. They can go inside and withdraw, but they can't tune us out. So, might have been quite a long answer to your to your point, Liz, but
yeah. Sorry, Trib. Yeah, I think that's just something to keep in mind, or for people to remember, that it can look so different even though you're asking the same question.
Mm-hmm.
And that if you have a really good bond, or you have an awareness, because Charlie gets that checked out look if I just leave her to explore things. Like, I have to encourage that exploration, or she's just like, no.
Mm-hmm.
And she checks out, because then she goes, I can feel her starting to want to just comply and do what I'm asking her to do, more than be a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just, the other side of the coin, maybe.
Well, and it's pretty interesting for your perspective, because a lot of the horses that I'm working with now, I don't have near the history that you do with Charlie.
Mm-hmm.
And so for you to go from, and not saying that compliance was what you were going for as far as the bond that you had with her, but it was how she was trained.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I think for her to, I think it might have been a bigger challenge than some of the other horses to step outside of where she knew she was supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
And
she knows exactly where she's supposed to be. All the other places are new territory.
yeah, and so for you, because I know a little bit, it reminds me of Annie's background, of course, is very different, but after I went through that first obstacle course with her and noticed that, you know, it was like the lights are on and nobody's home.
Mm-hmm.
And not really having any clue how to turn the lights back on. And what I chose to do was just pause a lot and wait. And I think that was, if I could have found a teacher, somebody probably would have told me that. But that's what I found worked best for her. Is that true with Charlie too?
Yeah, because for a long time, and I think even during like the first confidence course, I did a lot of that just waiting for her to figure it out. And she was either afraid of things or spooking at it or just not doing it. And I think when I realized what she needs for that, like that teamwork or that cooperation, what kind of support she needs from me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that's when I started to recognize her compliance, and because I don't think that was something I knew in our previous relationship at all, or an awareness for it, you know. So she was just forced to do things then.
Mm-hmm.
And compliance was her only option.
Well, yeah. Well, because again, that's what we were taught.
Yeah. So I think it was just a big mind shift that I can still ask her to do things. It was just like the tone of how I was asking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
She required it.
Hey, I've been listening. I just couldn't figure out how to like do the audio on my phone, and we were driving back in my dog's groomer. But I have been listening, and I think what I would just kind of add is it sounds like a lot of this is like just holding our intentions in mind and having our intention, you know, behind the invitation. So like you all were saying, it can look pretty similar in terms of what we're trying to do with them, but our intention is kind of what's different behind, you know, applying pressure and requiring them to do something in compliance or inviting them to do something in cooperation. At least that's what I'm trying to wrap my head around at this point.
Yes.
Differences.
Yeah. And do you have like a specific example, or, I mean, you know, because it was a great question, and I know that there's probably a lot behind it, but I just thought if there was some specific question that you had that we could kind of help, because I think this is a fabulous journey that you're on, and I'd love to help support you.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's probably a lot of examples, especially where I'm at, where we do a lot of mounted stuff too, and we do have horses that have come, a lot of our horses have come from like ranch, like working environments, and they're older, so they're kind of like retired from that life and coming to do stuff with us, and I have seen just a lot of them, especially as they initially come in, be very checked out. So, you know, how kind of navigating that, how do we get them to participate in a way where they're able to be present and in their bodies? And I feel like we're not only trying to do that in our environment, but kind of go back and rework stuff that has kind of happened in their past, because that's kind of what they have come in with, is just that checked out and expecting that interactions with humans are going to be a lot of work and that they kind of just need to get through them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they need to like get through them quickly. So it's like, oh, let's like slow down and be in our bodies. But I think the like root of this question for me has come from like hearing about the natural lifemanship model and kind of like reading some of their stuff, and I've done their fundamentals training. And for me, I really liked a lot of the principles that they talked about, but then when I went to the training and I was there practically, it didn't really make sense for me because they're using pressure to ask for connection. And there was a big disconnect and kind of like a distant, like disgenuine feeling that I came away with, and a feeling of confusion. Like their principles are based on connection and relationship, but they're using pressure. So then it feels like the horse has to connect. Like it's a requirement that they're always connected with us. And I agree that it's good to do everything within connection, but that just felt really sticky for me in terms of the connection was required and that pressure was used to achieve that connection. And so then when we're kind of thinking about like the difference between compliance and cooperation, it just, I don't know, just the way that they were explaining the difference, it didn't really make sense for me. So that's kind of where I was just trying to puzzle out, okay, so what does compliance look like and what does cooperation look like and what is the difference in terms of what we're asking and how we're asking?
I think that's the difference between connection or between it is just what you're asking and how.
Yeah.
I think the how is really the key difference because I can ask my horse to walk over here and put this person on her, or I can force her to walk over here and put this person on her, and that's going to change experience.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes the only maybe external difference that we could say is just that pause, because if we, like when we were talking about that teeter-totter, and Liz, you said you had to encourage Charlie a little bit more, but you didn't apply such a pressure and increase the force as she was standing there making up her mind, in essence. You extended the invitation, and I don't think there's any, because if it's more like we're communicating our intent to them, and some of the things we just want to do because, but we have kind of an ulterior motive with this teeter-totter to help with the proprioception and to see them bring it into balance themselves. So there is an intent, even as we ask them to go on this teeter-totter, that it's going to be something that's going to benefit them. Or even if we hadn't that, sometimes it can be something to benefit our relationship together. Can we accomplish this as a team? And so having the mindset of, could you please, instead of, you have to do this, that has to be a different vibration and energetic in our bodies. And so, whether we're just inquiring and supporting, or are we demanding and forcing? And some force, because horses are as sensitive as they are, force doesn't have to be like shoving or beating. Force can just be us being that tight in our body. And I think, I really think that a lot of people can kind of grasp this concept, but having the patience and the endurance and a strong ego to swim so much against the current and, be accused of coddling our horses. And, but, for all the things that they have done for me, I mean, just looking at my own life and how they can feel like they saved me emotionally countless times. And then when I became more aware and I started to employ their assistance in sessions and then handed over more and more of the co-facilitating to them and gave them that choice, the more things they offered that I wouldn't have been able to imagine. But it does take, I think it takes a lot of courage to go in such a different direction than the mainstream horse education. And I am wondering if some of that you were taught, the words were right and appealing, but there was a little bit under there where there wasn't the complete congruence. They weren't all the way aligned with what they were offering as education. So just trying to think of, I think our mindset is the biggest shift in whether they're complying or cooperating. And then from how our mindset grows, or from how our mindset offers the base, that's how more can grow. And then they have permission to be creative. And, or I don't know if creative is the right word, just to be horses, to be themselves. And I think it really speaks a lot of their heart and their, I'm going to say their commitment, because I think they're committed to dealing with us humans. Thank goodness, from all the kind of social blunders that we can make in their world.
Mm-hmm.
So I could tell a story about Blue, but before I do that, does anybody else have any other questions, comments? Okay, a Blue story. So, there's the Blue, I don't know, would you have called him uncatchable? How would, since both you, Janice and Liz, know him in person, how would you have described him?
Not trusting, flighty. Excuse me, kind of flighty.
Yeah, I don't know if uncatchable is right, because I think that's too far into a relationship. I think detached from absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of always waiting for, I mean, I always felt like he has a lot of internal turmoil, like he wants to be very curious and he wants to be a part of it, but he's also very uncertain as to what are the consequences going to be if he comes and joins in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he always wants to be aware of if he wants to book, he wants to be able to just go. Where's his escape?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't know. Yeah, just so detached. He didn't have any interest in any sort of participation. He was just waiting for the other shoe to drop all the time.
Yeah.
And how was every exhale of his going to hurt him?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, and this is a little pinto pony that we're talking about, who is stinking cute, by the way. But he would just, I nicknamed him Zoom Zoom, because that's how quickly that he would go most of the time away from whatever he perceived as a threat. And he perceived just about everything to do with people as a threat. But at the same time, I think that he is so incredibly curious. And why he's giving us humans a second chance, I'm really not sure, but I am so glad that he is. Because, let me see, is it about 2 months, I think, maybe? I just kind of decided and roped a few other people into my plan with me to just make friends with him and earn his trust. And because he has been cornered and chased a lot to be caught, catching him was not, it's still not on my radar. Sometimes I'll bring a halter rope with me, because eventually I would like him to see it not only as just something that's okay, but I really think we can help the horses see that halter and rope as a security, kind of like holding hands and encouraging you to go through something. So just kind of being with Blue and letting him choose how far away, what's his comfort zone. And watching him start, because at first, when I would be by him, it would definitely be that not only nobody's home, but oh my God, what is going to happen to me type thing. And his eyes would barely blink. They would be really hard. His head would be up, kind of like a giraffe. and his body was really tight. And so eventually he would, his eyes would start to blink. I think that's the first thing that I started to notice. And then those little, his lips would just kind of twitch. And eventually he would lick and chew. I think the other day, I counted, it was either 13 or 14 yawns that I had, just when I was by him. And now when we go out, I think he'll do this for you too also, I think. If you just call his name, he'll come right up to you. Now, he still doesn't wear a halter rope, and he's even participated in a couple sessions. But just by offering him that space to build trust has made a big difference. And it's darn near possible to make him comply with anything because he'll just run away. And he fortunately he's given us this second 100th chance. And if we leave the arena gate open, because he's kept out behind the indoor arena, he will come in and join into what's ever going on. And I usually leave that open. And today I was doing something, and we have some round pen panels in there that are blocking off round bales that are being stored in there so that the horses can't demolish them. And he was kind of coming towards the round pen, and I fiddled with the gate a little bit, and he bolted, but he didn't bolt out of the arena. He still stayed in. And so then I moved away from the terrifying gate and just stood there. And eventually he came up and said hello again and touched me with his nose. So, he to me is incredibly interesting because I can't, unless, without that lead rope, I can't ask him to just comply. Everything has to be an invitation. So it's kind of, I think, teaching me even more finesse. And I guess I could get a stick or a whip or a rope and chase him from behind. And then he probably would comply, but there's absolutely no reason to do that, I guess. So I guess I take that back, that there is a way to make him comply if I don't have a rope on him. But, with how it feels, I mean, it can almost make me tear up a little bit, because when I go out there, he will come up to me. And a couple times, he's been doing something, and he will let me pet him on either side of his neck right now without having to get too rigid. And sometimes after I've done that, I'll move away, and he needs sometimes to sniff at something on the ground or maybe pretend that he's grazing, something to move his mouth. And a couple times when he's done that, I thought that, I probably pushed his edge enough for the day and we were done, and I walked away. And sometimes he will come tearing after me. It's like, no, I'm not done yet. And that's the part that it just touches my heart so much that, he's starting now to zoom towards us at times rather than away. So maybe zoom's going to have a whole different meaning in a year or so.
I think I want to add that, well, I have multiple notes, but first,
Cool.
I think creating a visual of his boundary, I think if he could see you, you were too close at the beginning. I mean, just if he heard your gate rattle, if anything, if a human was around, you were too close, and he would have to instantly be in panic mode.
Mm-hmm.
So just just petting him was a huge victory outside of anything else he could do. And then I wanted to bring up how if he was cooperating and following you around and doing sessions, he was technically like caught. He was a part of the system. He didn't.
Yeah,
he wasn't extra.
I think you're right. And technically, I've been playing around. I like to call it bubble work, because, teaching people about boundaries and having the horse respect our bubble, so that if when you have your life up in your energy and you move towards them, they won't bump into your bubble. But I think there's also an element of magnetizing our bubble, so that when we start to move, they will come with us and they will follow. And I think that, there may not be many other places that would consider a horse caught unless they were wearing clothes, in essence. But I think we catch Blue all the time. I think you're right, Liz, because any time that we extend that invitation and he comes up to meet us, he's caught. The big difference is he can uncatch himself whenever the pressure is too much for him.
Which is still just him making a choice, and we would probably allow anybody else to do that. He just gets to go much farther than a horse on a string.
Right.
If he wants.
Yes. And I think that how most of the time when we're interacting with the horses on a lead rope, like that little clip of Petey, we're not, pulling on it. There's hardly even tension at times.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, they're making the choice to go with us, even though we could help them make a different choice. But I think that was, I don't know, I think it was with Jewel a little more than a year ago when I was really sinking in and making sense to me that, oh my gosh, what if we make this halter a form of security for them rather than that threat? Well, don't let them see you have a halter with you when you go out to catch them. Yeah, they'll never know otherwise.
I have one more addition.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, it's important that we always, I think since you really started working with him and I started playing, we allowed him to make mistakes and almost rewarded them. If he needed to take a step away or if he needed a break, he took the choice and we awarded it. We gave him a carrot. We threw a carrot. We did, that was an okay thing for him to do,
Mm-hmm.
to not comply and make another choice without having to be a madman.
Right, because I think that's like today when I rattled the gate and he had to vacate quickly. He had to vacate the space, but again, he didn't leave the arena, and then he came back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, yeah, you're right too. And I think about that time was when his eye had lost that nobody's home look.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's I think bridging that gap between like for Annie too, who was just in Charlie, all right, you say this, I do this, you say this, I do this, and then there's not a consequence in the form of punishment when I do something else. It was either do that or shut down.
But both of them, Charlie and Annie, I think Blue does it too, but they both release a lot too when they're given the okay to not comply.
Mm-hmm.
because Charlie does that all the time. When I feel that compliance and I let her make a choice, that's usually when one of her bigger releases come through. So.
Yep, that's a great point.
Yeah, I like that, because I've kind of learned that with one of our horses that came to off of our ranch, and he would, kind of do the opposite, where he will really just go inside and not move and be in compliance. And there was definitely that kind of exploration with him where when he first came, it was almost trying to like give him the opportunity to do anything outside of compliance, because otherwise he was just like standing there with himself. He would probably do what we asked, but it was just like, he didn't have any other like options in his mind. That was just it. And it was like, how can we give him another choice other than to comply? Like, we want you to be able to move your body if you want to move over here, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Option for you to move away and not just stand here if you don't want to stand here, kind of thing. And but yeah, it was rather challenging for a couple of months there, because he would just and it was almost like he was afraid to have that choice, because he was afraid of the what would come next if he did decide to move his body away and not be standing there and being compliant. So yeah, I like that kind of discussion about that too, because that's trying to move them out of compliance if they've been there for a long time, kind of thing.
Yeah, it can be quite a journey. And again, I think that's the it can push our mindset into those new territories of allowing them to have that choice. So how does he like his job now?
He does, yeah. And I do a lot of like, since Liz taught me the Masterson stuff in August, but he was like the first one that I went to do it, because I just felt like, oh yeah, this would be so good for him. And so he definitely asks for that, like, before or after a session, and he's much more animated. Like, he's not really afraid at all. He's more expressive with like his head, like if he wants someone out of his space, whereas before he was like the kind of horse that you wouldn't be like worried about anybody going and like hugging on, because he'd just stand there checked out and just anybody could just do anything to him, basically. And now if he wants people out of his space, he'll move his head and stuff and kind of indicate, like, no, this is kind of my boundary and I don't really want you here. And to me, that was like, yes, like, good, thank you. Because now I feel so much better, because he's not just this like sad little horse that's always just like checked out and doesn't really care what's happening to him. Like, he knows that, and he knows that if he does do something like that, most of the time we'll honor that. If he says, like, this is my space, I don't want anybody in it. And he's more animated in terms of moving his body. It was almost like he was so shut down when he came that he just couldn't even move. And so it was like, he didn't trot ever, like even just loose in the arena or loose out with the other horses. He was just always getting bit and kind of kicked around, not because our horses are mean, but just because if they gave him a warning, he just didn't move. And so being in a herd, I think, has also been really good for him, because now he'll just move his body and and kind of do his thing. But yeah, I've definitely seen a huge change in him since he came. And I think a lot of that was just people finally paying attention to him and to, and honoring what he was saying, and not just wanting him to be checked out all the time, basically. So yeah, and I do think he likes it now. He's mostly, he mostly has like little kids that work with him, because he's super slow and pretty safe and that kind of thing. And he definitely seems to, instead of just being checked out when people are riding him and that kind of thing, he's more engaged with the kids. And you can see kind of, not only is he more expressive with his body, but the eye is there too, where he's paying attention and looking around. And just seems more engaged than just, yeah, I'm giving a pony ride and I'm going to have to walk around the arena 20 times and be done kind of thing, which makes it so much easier because the first few times when he got there and I think I was just teaching for somebody else who was already having him in their lessons, and I taught a lesson with him, and it was like, whoa, okay, I'm not doing this anymore until he's more present, because it just felt like you were saying, it feels so bad, because you know that they're just complying rather than making a choice or wanting to be there or being present.
Mm-hmm. Wow, he's so lucky he has you.
Yeah. Yep.
He's pretty cool, Tonto boy. He's cute. And I think for him, he probably, I don't really know much about his background, but just, you know, the feeling of love that they get to in terms of intention and fostering that, I think, in the people that we work with and the people that come around them makes a big difference. Because I think he was probably expecting, or just, you know, to his past, there wasn't really ever that kind of connection. So for him, I see that with his riders now, who really, I mean, they're little kids and they really do just love him, right? Very, like, genuinely. And so he's very open to that kind of connection now. So that's pretty cool for him, I think.
Yeah. What was his job before you guys got him?
I know he worked on a ranch for a long time, and then kind of right before we got him, he was just out in the pasture with like one other horse, and that horse died. So that's how he kind of came to us, because he was alone, kind of not doing anything. So yeah, he doesn't seem like he had the best time. And our massage guy said that there's a spot in his neck that's so tense and tight and dense that it seems like he was tied down with like a tire, like with a rope and a tire on him. That's really like the only time he ever sees that kind of like concentrated muscle tension and kind of trauma to like one specific part of the neck. So he, which makes sense for him to me, that he was like immobilized basically for long periods of time. But yeah, he's in his second life now, so.
Yay.
Yeah, I bet he'd like a lot of release work around his neck.
Yeah, he does. He does. And it is very interesting when I started doing it with him. A lot of horses will get really still, it seems like, when you're doing it, and they'll just stand there and release. But for being a horse that was always so still when he came, he likes to move and walk as we're doing it. He just yeah. So I think that's part of it for him too.
Yeah. Finally gets to move. He doesn't want to give that up.
Exactly.
Oh, well, cool. It's so heartwarming and exciting to watch and be connected with more people that are working diligently to give the horses a choice and to help their world be the best that we can make it. And I think, you know, trusting that as much as we give them, we're going to get tenfold back. You know, helping with other people, helping with us, helping us learn. And I think that's that right there is enough to keep going and swimming upstream.
For sure.
All right, so we're getting close to an hour. Any other questions or comments before we say till next time?
I'm good. Thank you for holding this Zoom, because we kind of had this question come up in class and I felt like it was never really discussed at length, and I think it's an important one. So thanks.
Well, you're very welcome. And if you ever want to have it again, you let me know.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, there was lots of unanswered questions, so.
All right. Well, we'll have lots of calls.
Yeah. thanks for sharing that story, Kelsey, because it just really goes to show how, it's never too late. And that time and intention and space, if we as humans let that happen, like the magic just unfolds.
Ooh, that gives me chills.
So I'm just picturing all these little kids loving on him.
I'll have to send you all pictures of it because
Yeah, I mean, that just is like
teddy bear
so
and
touching.
they're so excited to see him. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
All right. Well, thank you all very much for attending this pretty powerful conversation.
Yeah.
And thanks to all our horse teachers for allowing it to happen.
Yeah.
All right. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.